Welcome back to the Development Research and Practice course. My name is Christopher Bjerkefur, and I'm a data science consultant at Time Analytics. This week, week number 2, we will be covering Chapter 2, Setting the Stage for Effective and Efficient Collaboration. In this chapter, we will talk about the setup that you should always consider before the start of any empirical research project. Most of this setup is not specific to a single project, so the time you spend on these topics discussed in this chapter will benefit you on all the projects that you work on. The type of data work discussed in this book is done on computers. However, this includes all types of computers, such as desktop, laptops, but also servers and cloud resources. Anyways, since the computers are the main tools of our data work, it is important that we set up our computers properly before the start of a project. If you don't spend time on the technical collaboration environments before you start working on your project with expectations that you can address all requirements as they come up, you are likely to have to spend substantial time in the middle of the project addressing those requirements. This is time that you and your college much better could spend working on the actual research. Not planning your technical tools in advance and relying on ad hoc fixes can ultimately have negative impact on the research quality, as well as the topics of reproducibility, transparency, and credibility discussed last week in Chapter 1. Creating a plan for technical collaboration and basing it on standardized solution is the best way to avoid that something like that ever happens. Chapter 2 of Development in Research Practice is full of guidelines for how to do this and what you should make sure to include in these plans. The chapter also includes links to even more resources on this topic. The last section of Chapter 2 talks about the research ethics considerations that you need to take into account if any of your research activities can have any effect on any humans in any way. This is the case for almost all of the type of research projects we have had in mind when writing this book. If this is the case in your project, you need to request and obtain ethical approval before you start any of your research activities. In addition to ethical approval, if you're also identifying data on humans, then you need to make sure you have a computer setup where you can keep that data properly protected. Each time you handle identified data, you will always expose it to some risk, so the best way to make proper protection of your data as easy as possible is to handle sensitive data as little as you can. This is best done by not collecting more identifying data than you absolutely need, and to work with the de-identified versions of your data as much as possible. For all the outcomes discussed in this chapter, it is typically the task team leader or the principal investigator that is responsible that these outputs are created. However, in practice, it is often a more junior team member that finds standardized solutions and adapt those to the specific context of the project. Even though a more junior team member might do most of the work, it is still important that the head of the research team signs off on all these decisions and make sure they are documented properly, as they are ultimately responsible if something would go wrong. All research assistants, especially if they were not part of developing the technical collaboration plan or the data privacy guideline, are responsible to make sure that they have understood what has been decided in these documents and that they ask for guidelines if there are any tools or practices that they are not familiar with. This is especially important for the data privacy guidelines, as it is often impossible to fix data leakages after they have occurred. And while we encourage teams to spend time at the beginning of a project to try to predict all technical requirements for that project, it is still common that something unforeseen happens that creates a requirement that the team did not predict. This is inevitable and will sometimes happen no matter how well you have prepared. And while it is the task team's leader or principal investigator's responsibility that the decision documents are updated accordingly, it is typically a research assistant who identified the new requirement in the first place. Therefore, junior staff spends much more time than senior staff working day to day on each project. So if junior staff does not communicate new requirements they identify to senior staff, it is likely that these requirements are not addressed in time to make sure that they do not cause any negative impact to the project. This week, this is the requirement readings for this week. This week, we obviously want you to read Chapter 2 of Development Research in Practice. Additionally, we have listed 4 wiki articles that we think are high-level DIME wiki articles that everyone should read. And finally, we also want you to look at Pillar 1 and Pillar 4 in the DIME research standards. You only have to read the main documents for these 2 pillars, but we suggest that you at least take a quick look at what templates and guidelines associated with these pillars you also find in this GitHub repository, so you have an idea of what resources you can find there. If you want to read more on these topics, we have listed a few other DIME wiki articles that we think are good articles that goes along with the topic of this chapter. We also have listed 4 different trainings that we have given in the past. This is the material of the trainings. They do not all include recordings, but some of them have. But at least in these links, you can find the material for these trainings where you can follow along by yourself. And these are all topics that are also related to Chapter 2. We hope you have a good week and that you will enjoy the readings for this week. And we look forward to discuss more with you on the lecture session this week. Thank you very much.